Hey, it's nearly Halloween, so I suppose I should find something scary to play. The problem is I've played some terrifyingly bad Game Boy titles, but nothing that's been designed intentionally to give me a fright. That's probably because the handheld, and its portable peers, simply don't have the power to generate the requisite creepy atmosphere. That may sound unfair, but looking at the titles available, you certainly get the impression developers didn't think survival horror was a viable option on the platform. Instead, you got things like Kid Dracula, Castlevania Legends, and Gargoyle's Quest, games that play around with classic horror characters and tropes, but in a largely child-friendly context. So with that in mind, I guess I should review something gentler this Halloween. Something like, who could that be at this hour? Right then, Alone in the Dark, the new nightmare. Let's do this. Released on the Game Boy Color in 2001, it was developed by Pocket Studios and published by Infogrames. Distributed simultaneously alongside the PC, PlayStation and Dreamcast versions, you might expect it to be some tiresome spin-off, with the exploration of sinister environments replaced with cookie-cutter 2D platforming. After all, this is Infogrames we're talking about. But it actually attempted to be as similar as it could to the home console iterations, and uses the pre-rendered backgrounds from the PC title, displaying them using the handheld's high colour mode. This is a technical trick which allows more than 2,000 colours to be used on screen at once, but as you might expect, this takes a lot out of the portable, so little action can take place within these kaleidoscopic locales. This meant it was utilised very rarely, and almost exclusively in slower paced adventures like The Fish Files and the New Addams Family. So inevitably the sheer ambition of this port generated a lot of hype, especially as Capcom had scrapped a similarly impressive port of the original Resident Evil for the same system. Was it really wise to attempt such an undertaking though? Can survival horror really work on the small screen? Should I stop asking all these leading questions? Let's pop the game in and see. You play as Edward Carnby, who travels to Shadow Island to solve the mystery of an evil statuette, as well as the murder of his friend. To achieve this, you wander around various gloomy locations, solving item-based puzzles and battling against various creatures of the night. However, before you start solving any conundrums, you'll likely spend the opening few minutes of play in awe of how much this is pushing the Game Boy Color to its very limits. The shading in some areas is stunning, and the deliberately limited use of music and sound effects helps to concoct a reasonably eerie atmosphere. Although these cartoon red eyes are a little cringeworthy, it's sadly just a few seconds after this that the game really does surrender any chance it has to scare you. And that's with the introduction of random battles. These occur every so often while you're exploring, with this message appearing every single time before them. You're then whisked away to one of these self-contained isometric arenas, which ask you to dispatch all the foes within them, including spiders, dogs, and these HR Giga rejects. These sections are almost the only parts where you can die, with the only real exception this sewer area with a snake beast that kills you instantly if you touch it. It looked like some bad plumbing. How was I supposed to know it was a death trap? Going back to these action segments though, the only truly scary thing about them is how slowly Carnby moves. Some of these enemies might be a little creepy if they popped out of the actual environments, but in this context they're just part of a slow-paced, unsatisfying target shoot. There's also no blood. I'm no gorehound, but it would have been perhaps a wise decision to add some claret to at least create some feeling of peril. There's blood streaked down some of the halls in the mansion, so I don't really understand why there's none in the actual parts where your life is in danger. This means that the game has to fall back on its puzzles to keep you engaged, and to be fair, they're not bad. There's nothing too taxing, but they all make logical sense, for the most part. Using your inventory as well as general navigation isn't too much of a pain either, and although the fixed perspectives can occasionally annoy, working my way around the mansion's lobby was a nightmare for example, they're far from a deal breaker. In fact, if you've played the game on PC, Dreamcast, PlayStation or PS2, you'll be surprised at how closely this iteration follows it at times, combat sections aside. You did have a second story where you played as Aline Seadrak in the home console versions. Here she only appears in the cutscenes, but overall I'd say this is still one of the better action adventures on the Game Boy Color, and worth playing just to see what the handheld is capable of visually. But it's not scary, I'm afraid. Or not afraid, as the case would be. You could argue the odds were always against it though, as no 8-bit system has ever managed to craft a survival horror game that really got under your skin. The only possible exception that really comes to mind is 3D Monster Maze for the Sinclair ZX81, an excellent example of minimalism helping to create a genuinely tense experience. That was on a home console though, and for years survival horror has never really found a firm footing on handheld devices. Instead, we've seen a load of ports and spin-offs of existing franchises, but little that's original or really takes advantage of the many unique assets that portables possess. That was, until the smartphone. Claw your way past the spine-chilling number of Match 3 puzzlers and endless runners, and you might be surprised by some of the survival horror experiences you'll dig up on both iOS and Android devices. There's the disquieting tone of Year Walk, the fraught atmosphere of Eyes, and then there's the sheer chutzpah of both Papa Sangre 1 and 2, both titles which ask you to close your eyes, stick in your headphones, and guide yourself around environments using binaural audio alone.
Quick, the roof's falling in. Run!
Ideally played in the dark and standing up, the sequel actually uses the accelerometer to tell which direction you're facing. They're dazzlingly unique experiences that simply wouldn't work on a home console. These games may not signal a major shift in where survival horror will thrive in the years to come, but they do at least fulfill some of the untapped potential of portable devices to give you a jolly good scare. Whoever sent this trying to give me a fright clearly failed though.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.